Friends? Seeking the consent of the American people to govern them as President of the United States. We sometimes forget that that's exactly what is happening here. We live in a country where people have to ask for our consent to govern us. And I want to thank you for putting yourself forward for that. It's not an easy task, but thank you very much. I also want to note two more things. The first is that Governor Romney has told you that I am all that stands between you and lunch. So I will try to be brief. And secondly, as the governor said, I have been out of office now, of course, for 3.5 years. I've been back at Stanford. Not a bad place to be. And very often asked what's the biggest difference between being out of government and being in government. Well, there are a lot of differences, but I'll tell you the most important one is that I get up every morning. I read the newspaper, and I say, isn't that interesting? And I go right on to whatever else I want to do, because I'm no longer responsible for what's in the newspaper. But like you, I am concerned about the state of our country and the state of our world, and that's why we are gathered here today in this beautiful setting to do what must be done. And that is to support and help deliver the election of Mitt Romney for President of the United States. A turbulent time. And it's a turbulent time because the international system has been through three great shocks in the last decade or so. First of all, there was the shock of 9/11. And I can tell you that if you were in a position of authority on September 11th, in trying to phone Don Rumsfeld, I just heard his phone keep ringing and ringing, and I turned around and a plane had hit the Pentagon. From that time on, your concept of what constitutes physical security is never the same. The United States of America from that day on would know that failed states, places called Afghanistan and Yemen and possibly Libya and other places, would in many ways become our greatest security threat. And we would avoid another attack on our territory, not because the terrorists weren't trying, but because of the vigilance of our security people, of our intelligence people, and most importantly, because we have young men and women who volunteer. They volunteer at the front lines of freedom to defend us and to hold our shock, the global financial and economic crisis, and as much as 9/11 challenged our concept of what constitutes physical security, the global economic and financial shock would challenge what constitutes economic security and prosperity. And we would see in this country people lose their homes, lose their jobs, lose their sense of a future. Indeed, I can remember as a little girl, and my grandfather said to my mother, Angelina, you and John need to buy a house as soon as you can. The value of a house never goes down. And so imagine how Americans feel now as they watch the value of their homes less than what they paid for them. And imagine those people who really must now think that they've been unemployed so long, they're never going to find another job. And that has reverberated throughout the world as we see Europe struggle and we see even slow growth in the emerging markets. And we wonder, when again will we get to economic growth led by the private sector, in which we once again attain a hopeful future for economic prosperity. And so our concept of economic security has been shaken. And then there's been a third great shock, and that's the Arab Spring. And in many ways, that is the most dramatic of all of these shocks, because you see, people are seizing their right to the very freedoms that we enjoy, the right to say what you please, to worship as you please, to be free from the knowledge of secret police at night, and to have those who would govern you ask for your consent. And what you're seeing in the Middle East is what happens when reform comes too late. Because every authoritarian regime experiences and will experience what I call the Ceausescu moment. Now that's the day when Nicolae Ceausescu, the dictator of Romania, stood in a square in Bucharest before 250,000 people in 1989 as revolutions were spreading all over Eastern Europe, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Germany. And he was exhorting them as to what he could do for them, what he had done for them. And all of a sudden, one old lady, young girl, then 10 people, then 1,000, then 100,000. And now Ceausescu knows that something's wrong, so he turns to run, but the young military officer was supposed to deliver him to freedom, delivers him instead to the revolution, and he and his wife, Ilana, are executed. The Ceausescu moment is when what separates the dictator from his people, fear, breaks down. An old woman yells fire. A soldier refuses to fire in the crowd. A policeman gives way at the Berlin Wall, and all of a sudden, all that's left is anger. And that's what you see in the Middle East. And so, yes, these three great shocks have essentially destroyed the foundations of the international system as we know it. And yes, it's chaotic and it's tumultuous and it's even dangerous. But what we're feeling most is not just that tumult. We've been tumult before. What we're feeling is the absence of American leadership. Because you see, when there isn't a country that has a view of how human history ought to unfold, then no country, friend or foe, knows that there is indeed an anchor toward a better future. And the United States has got a view. That view is that free markets and free people hold the future. That free markets and free peoples will lead to prosperity. That free markets and free peoples will ultimately lead to peace. And when the United States doesn't lead, when our friends aren't certain that they can count on us, and they aren't so certain right now, and when our foes don't fear us or respect us, this is what you get. Tumultuous, dangerous, chaotic times. The world seeks, desires American leadership. Yes, they fuss about it sometimes, but when the United States of America decides that it's just going to be any old country, that it is going to be governed by the lowest common denominator collective will of the so-called international community through the United Nations, this is what you get. And that is why we have got to elect a president of the United States who understands that the United States of America has to lead, has to inspire the people of the United States of America to want to lead. And it does it not through high-flown rhetoric about hope and change, but through an essence within himself that he knows that this is truly an exceptional country, that we're not just any other country. Any other country would not have sent young men to storm the beaches of Normandy for the rights and freedoms of people they would never know. Any country would not have stood vigil in Europe until the Soviet Union could be defeated and Europe could emerge faltering at peace. Any country would not have stood vigil in Asia until great democracies would emerge in Japan and Korea, and just any old country would not have gone to Baghdad and Basra and Kabul and Kandahar to try and deliver a better future for those people, and with that future, a better and more secure future for ourselves. And so we have got to have a president of the United States who understands the essence of who we are. And by the way, that exceptionalism is not just a factor of what we do in the international system. It starts with who we are at home. And you cannot lead the American people to lead in the international system if you do not lead them to repair the damage to who we are at home. That means getting our internal house in order. It means dealing with the deficits. It means dealing with entitlements. It means not living beyond our means and borrowing money that we cannot afford. It means recognizing that this country's exceptionalism has come through its ability to mobilize human potential better than any other political experiment in human history, and it's done it because we have believed that it doesn't matter where you came from, it matters where you're going. And that has meant that we have brought people here from around the world for generations just to be a part of that. Sergey Brin comes here at 7 years old from Russia and found Google. And many of people who come from modest means can get a good education and then go on to do great things. And unless we deal with the K-12 crisis that we have, we are going to lose a very important part of ourselves. Because when I can look at your zip code and I can tell whether you're going to get good education, can I really say it doesn't matter where you came from, it matters where you're going. We're losing the essence of who we are. And it is exploding in a narrative that is not the American narrative. It's a narrative that is pushed by our current president, that I'm doing poorly because you are doing well. That has never been the American narrative. Ours has never been a narrative of agreement, and ours has never been a narrative of entitlement. It has been one of empowerment. And that, too, is why we need a change in Washington. We need a change in Washington because the essence of who we are as Americans is really at stake. And since the essence of who we are as Americans is at stake, so is the essence of what the international system will become. And don't think for a minute that if we don't lead, someone won't. And that someone might be a country that doesn't believe in free markets and free people. That would be bad for our interests. It would be bad for our values. It would be bad for prosperity and security and peace. That is why it is time for all of us, in any way that we can, to mobilize, to get our act together, to storm Washington, D.C., with somebody who understands that.
What? Romney. He said right?